Hi, you guys. Welcome back. And of course, if you are new to Meaningful Motivations with Tracy Erickson, welcome. My name is Tracy Erickson, and this is video number 5 in the Evolution of Consciousness series. And this episode is all about the 7 levels of mind in relation to the 7 tests of the Secret Brotherhood and the 7 degrees achieved by Jesus. So stay tuned. If you remember, in part 4, we discussed the 7 stages of initiation and the 7 tests of the Brotherhood. And we discussed those 7 different levels in both Esoteric Cosmology by Rudolf Steiner, as well as the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ by Levi. So in this video, I'm going to go a little deeper in these 7 the 7 tests of the Brotherhood, or the 7 stages of initiation. And I'm actually going to be relating that to the 7 levels of mind. As I've discussed in previous videos, I have this theory about the dimensions and 7 levels of mind. And so that can also relate to the 7 stages of initiation. So if you remember, these 7 levels of mind are the physical level, the emotional level, the lower astral level, the higher astral level, the mental level, the causal level, and the Christ or Buddha consciousness at the very top here. So the first time I ever read the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ was many years ago. It was over a decade ago. And ever since then, I've read the book many times. I've added different notes and flags and things like that throughout the years. And I always go back and reference this book for different reasons and purposes for my own development. And when I was making part 4 of this series, Evolution of Consciousness, I decided, after finding those 7 tests of the Brotherhood in here, I decided to see if there were any messages for the book. And when I flipped it open, it fell open to a page that had this card in it. And this is a note card that I had left in the book probably years ago. So in this card, it shows the different levels of mind, and it also lists the different degrees achieved by Jesus. And strangely, it was just in a random page in the book. And we'll talk more about that in part 6. In this video, I'm actually going to be reading all of the chapters of the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ that are dealing with these 7 tests of the Secret Brotherhood and the 7 degrees that were achieved by Jesus. And the last degree was the Christ. So as we move through these chapters, I'm also going to be reminding you of what level of mind that each of these different tests could actually be relating to. And so this knowledge can help you on your own path for your evolution of consciousness. The master took down from the wall a scroll on which was written down the number and the name of every attribute and character. He said, "The circle is the symbol of the perfect man, and 7 is the number of the perfect man. The Logos is the perfect word, that which creates, that which destroys, and that which saves. This Hebrew master is the Logos of the Holy One, the circle of the human race, the 7 of time. And in the record book, the scribe wrote down the Logos, circle, 7. And thus was Jesus known. The Master said, "The Logos will give heed to what I say. No man can enter into light till he has found himself. Go forth and search till you have found your soul, and then return." The guide led Jesus into a room in which the light was faint and mellow, like the light of early dawn. The chamber walls were marked with mystic signs, with hieroglyphs and sacred texts. And in this chamber, Jesus found himself alone, where he remained for many days. He read the sacred texts, thought out the meanings of the hieroglyphs, and sought the import of the Master's charge to find himself. A revelation came. He got acquainted with his soul. He found himself. Then he was not alone. One night he slept, and at the midnight hour, a door that he had not observed was opened. And a priest in somber garb came in and said, "My brother, pardon me for coming in at this unseemly hour, but I have come to save your life. You are the victim of a cruel plot. The priests of Heliopolis are jealous of your fame, and they have said that you shall never leave these gloomy crypts alive. The higher priests do not go forth to teach the world, and you are doomed to temple servitude. Now, if you would be free, you must deceive these priests, must tell them that you are here to stay for life. And then, when you have gained all that you wish to gain, I will return, and by a secret way will lead you forth, that you may go in peace." And Jesus said, "My brother man, would you come here to teach deceit? Am I within these holy walls to learn the wiles of vile hypocrisy? Nay, man, my Father scorns deceit, and I am here to do his will. Deceive these priests, not while the sun shall shine. What I have said, I have said. I will be true to them, to God, and to myself." And then the tempter left, and Jesus was again alone. But in a little time, a white-robed priest appeared and said, "Well done, the Logos has prevailed. This is the trial chamber of hypocrisy." And then he led the way, and Jesus stood before the judgment seat. And all the brothers stood. The Hierophant came forth and laid his hand on Jesus' head, and placed within his hands a scroll, on which was written just one word: sincerity. And not a word was said. The guide again appeared and led the way, and in a spacious room replete with everything a student craves, was Jesus bade to rest and wait. So in the end, to receive the degree sincerity, Jesus had to look within himself and see where hypocrisy exists in his own thinking, in order to also identify that in the other person. So this can be related to the physical level of consciousness, your conscious mind, your physical waking consciousness. So the first initiation is to get to the point where you understand that everything you see here in this 3D world is actually a reflection for your inner self, is a reflection for your Godhead to recognize itself. The Logos did not care to rest. He said, "Why wait in this luxurious room? I need not rest. My Father's work upon me presses hard. I would go on and learn my lessons all. If there are trials, let them come, For every victory over self gives added strength. And then the guide led on, and in a chamber dark as night was Jesus placed and left alone, and days were spent in this deep solitude. And Jesus slept, and in the dead of night a secret door was opened. And in a priest's attire 2 men came in, each carried in his hand a little flickering lamp. Approaching Jesus, one spoke out and said, "Young man, our hearts are grieved because of what you suffer in these fearful dens, and we have come as friends to bring you light and show the way to liberty. We once, like you, were in these dens confined and thought that through these weird, uncanny ways, we could attain to blessedness and power. But in a luckful moment, we were undeceived, and making use of all of our strength, we broke our chains. And then we learned that all this service is corruption in disguise. These priests are criminals just hid away. They boast in sacrificial rites they offer to their gods and burn them while alive. Poor birds and beasts, yea, children, women, men. And now they keep you here, and at a certain time may offer you in sacrifice. We pray you, brother, break your chains. Come, go with us, accept of freedom while you may." And Jesus said, "Your little tapers show the light you bring. Pray, who are you? The words of man are worth no more than is the man himself. These temple walls are strong and high. How gained you entrance to this place?" The men replied, "Beneath these walls are many hidden ways, and we who have been priests spent months and years within these dens and know all of them." "Then you are traitors," Jesus said. "A traitor is a fiend. He who betrays another man is never man to trust. If one has only reached the plane of treachery, he's a lover of deceit, and will betray a friend to serve his selfish self. Behold, you man, or whatsoever you be, your words fall lightly on my ears. Could I prejudge these 100 priests, turn traitor to myself and them, because of what you say when you confess your treachery? No man can judge for me, and if I judge till testimony all is in, I might not judge aright. Nay, men, by whatsoever way you came, return. My soul prefers the darkness of the grave to little flickering lights like these you bring. My conscience rules that these, my brothers, have to say all here, and when the testimony all is in, I will decide. You cannot judge for me, nor I for you. Begone, you men, begone, and leave me to this charming light, for while the sun shines not, within my soul there's a light surpassing that of sun or moon." Then with an angry threat that they would do him harm, the wily tempters left, and Jesus was again alone. Again the white-robed priest appeared and led the way, and Jesus stood again before the Hierophant. And not a word was said, but in his hands the Master placed a scroll on which the word suggestive, justice, was inscribed. And Jesus was the master of the phantom forms of prejudice and of treachery. In the test of the Brotherhood, based on the degree that Jesus earned, called justice, this is related to the emotional level of mind, which is also the first level of subconscious mind. And in this level, it is important to understand how you're feeling, because it's also important to recognize that people outside of you will try to make you feel a certain way. And Jesus obviously recognized that through his emotional level of mind. And he was able to see the treachery in these visitors into the caves. They were trying to use his emotions. They were trying to manipulate him with fear or just with this feeling of being a prisoner. And he recognized that they were trying to be manipulative. Therefore, he used this level of mind wisely in that present moment and earned the degree of justice. The Logos waited 7 days and then was taken to the Hall of Fame, a chamber rich in furnishings and lighted up with gold and silver lamps. The colors of its ceilings, decorations, furnishings, and walls were blue and gold. Its shelves were filled with books of masterminds. The paintings and the statues were the works of highest art. And Jesus was entranced with all this elegance and these manifests of thought. He read the sacred books and sought the meanings of the symbols and the hieroglyphs. And when he was absorbed in deepest thought, a priest approached and said, "Behold the glory of this place. My brother, you are highly blessed. Few men of earth so young have reached such heights of fame. Now, if you do not waste your life in search for hidden things that men can never comprehend, you may be founder of a school of thought that will ensure you endless fame. For your philosophy is deeper far than that of Plato, and your teachings please the common people more than those of Socrates. Why seek for mystic light within these acquainted dens? Go forth and walk with men, and think with men, and they will honor you. And after all, these weird initiations may be myths, and your Messiah hopes but base illusions of the hour. I would advise you to renounce uncertain things and choose the course that leads to certain fame." And thus the priest, a demon in disguise, sang siren songs of unbelief, and Jesus meditated long and well on what he had said. The conflict was a bitter one, for King Ambition is a sturdy foe to fight. For 40 days the higher wrestled with the lower self, and then the fight was won. Faith rose triumphant. Unbelief was not. Ambition covered up his face and fled away, and Jesus said, "The wealth, the honor, and the fame of the earth are but the baubles of an hour." When this short span of earthly life has all been measured out, man's bursting baubles will be buried with his bones. Yea, what a man does for his selfish self will make no markings on the credit side of life. The good that men for other men shall do becomes a ladder strong on which the soul may climb to wealth and power and fame of God's own kind that cannot pass away. Give me the poverty of men, the consciousness of duty done in love, the approbation of my God, and I will be content. And then he lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, "My Father God, I thank thee for this hour. I ask not for the glory of thyself. I fain would be a keeper of thy temple gates and serve my brother man." Again was Jesus called to stand before the Hierophant. Again no word was said, but in his hands the Master placed a scroll on which was written, "Faith." And Jesus bowed his head in humble thanks, then went his way. In this test of faith, Jesus understood that not everything is as it seems. The devil comes wearing very tempting clothing and shiny lights, making you believe that it's all fun and good. But in the end, Jesus was able to recognize that and recognize that not everything is as it seems in this lower astral level of mind. This lower astral level is the next level inward into the subconscious mind. And this is kind of like the fourth dimensional reality. And this is where things really aren't always as they seem. And so it is easy to be tempted here. And so this degree of faith is understanding that when you are doing actions and taking the steps necessary that are in alignment with your true purpose in life, then you will have the faith to know that the best is yet to come. Having faith is also important to have patience in your creations. So rather than dropping your true purpose for this quick fame and fortune, Jesus knew that if he stayed true to his heart's true desire and the mission that God sent him here to complete, well, he knew that that is where the true wealth and treasure and fame would come from. When other certain days had passed, the guide led Jesus to the hall of mirth, a hall most richly furnished and replete with everything a carnal heart could wish. The choicest viands and the most delicious wines were on the boards, and maids in gay attire served all with grace and cheerfulness. And men and women richly clad were there, and they were wild with joy. They sipped from every cup of mirth. And Jesus watched the happy throng in silence for a time. And then a man in garb of sage came up and said, "Most happy is the man who, like the bee, can gather sweets from every flower. The wise man is the one who seeks for pleasure and can find it everywhere. At best, man's span of life on earth is short, and then he dies and goes, he knows not where. Then let us eat and drink and dance and sing and get the joys of life, for death comes on apace. It is but foolishness to spend a life for other men. Behold, all die and lie together in the grave, where none can know and none can show forth gratitude." But Jesus answered not. Upon the tinseled guests in all their rounds of mirth, he gazed in silent thought. And then among the guests he saw a man whose clothes were coarse, who showed in face and hands the lines of toil and want. The giddy throng found pleasure in abusing him. They jostled him against the wall and laughed at his discomfiture. And then a poor, frail woman came, who carried in her face and form the marks of sin and shame. And without mercy she was spit upon and jeered and driven from the hall. And then a little child with timid ways and hungry mien came in and asked for just a morsel of their food. But she was driven out, uncared for and unloved, and still the merry dance went on. And when the pleasure-seekers urged that Jesus join them in their mirth, he said, "How could I seek for pleasure for myself while others are in want? How can you think that while children cry for bread, while those in haunts of sin call out for sympathy and love, that I can fill myself to full with the good things of life? I tell you, nay, we are all kin, each one a part of the great human heart. I cannot see myself apart from that poor man that you scorned and crowded to the wall, nor from the one in female garb who came up from the haunts of vice to ask for sympathy and love, who was by you so ruthlessly pushed back into her den of sin, nor from that little child that you drove from your midst to suffer in the cold, bleak winds of night. I tell you, men, what you have done to these, my kindred, you have done to me. You have insulted me in your own home. I cannot stay. I will go forth and find that child, that woman, and that man, and give them help until my life's blood all has ebbed away. I call it pleasure when I help the helpless, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, and speak good words of cheer to those unloved, discouraged, and depressed. And this that you call mirth is but a phantom of the night, but flashes of fire of passion, painting pictures on the walls of time. And while the Logos spoke, the white-robed priest came in and said to him, "The council waits for you." Then Jesus stood again before the bar. Again no word was said. The Hierophant placed in his hands a scroll, on which was writ, "Philanthropy." And Jesus was a victor over the selfish self. In the degree earned by Jesus called philanthropy, he was victor over the selfish self. So this is related to the next level of mind, and that is the higher astral level. And this is more connected with the heart and more connected with like that 5D consciousness. And it is here in this test that Jesus recognized that he can see God's divinity in each and every single person. And so it is in this higher astral level of mind where if you reach that level and achieve initiation into that level of mind, then you have connected with the heart chakra and you can actually see the divinity in all people. And the philanthropy is earned through giving service to others and understanding the whole reason for being here is actually for everyone to help one another. And it's really just connecting with that, with the heart. The sacred temple groves were rich in statues, monuments, and shrines. Here, Jesus loved to walk and meditate. And after he had conquered self, he talked with nature in these groves for 40 days. And then the guide took chains and bound him hand and foot, and then cast him into a den of hungry beasts, of unclean birds, and creeping things. The den was dark as night. The wild beasts howled. The birds in fury screamed. The reptiles hissed. And Jesus said, "Who was it that did bind me thus? Why did I meekly sit to be bound down with chains? I tell you, none has the power to bind a human soul. Of what are fetters made?" And in his might he rose, and what he thought were chains were only worthless cords that parted at his touch. And then he laughed and said, "The chains that bind men to the carcasses of the earth are forged in fancy's shop, are made of air and wielded in illusion's fires. If man will stand erect and use the power of will, his chains will fall like worthless rags, for will and faith are stronger than the stoutest chains that men have ever made." And Jesus stood erect among the hungry beasts and birds and said, "What is this darkness that envelopes me? 'Tis but the absence of the light. And what is light? 'Tis but the breath of God vibrating in the rhythm of rapid thought." And then he said, "Let there be light." And with a mighty will, he stirred the ethers up, and their vibrations reached the plane of light, and there was light. The darkness of that den of night became the brightness of a newborn day. And then he looked to see the beasts and birds and creeping things, lo, they were not. And Jesus said, "Of what are souls afraid? Fear is the chariot in which man rides to death. And when he finds himself within the chamber of the dead, he learns that he has been deceived. His chariot was a myth, and death a fancy child. But someday all men's lessons will be learned, and from the den of unclean beasts and birds and creeping things, he will arise to walk in light." And Jesus saw a ladder made of gold, on which he climbed, and at the top the white-robed priests awaited him. Again he stood before the council bar. Again no word was said. Again the Hierophant reached forth his hand to bless. He placed in Jesus' hand another scroll, and on this one was written, "Heroism." The Logos had encountered fear and all his phantom host, and in the conflict, he achieved the victory. This test, heroism, was one of the toughest, and this is related to the mental level, which is the very last level of subconscious mind. And within this test of initiation, Jesus was able to recognize that it was his own thoughts that created both the fear and the light. So this test was earned by Jesus simply having the courage to look fear in its face and to understand that the fear actually was rooted in his own mind. In all the land there was no place more grandly furnished than the beauty parlors of the Temple of the Sun. Few students ever entered these rich rooms. The priests regarded them with awe and called them halls of mysteries. When Jesus had attained the victory over fear, he gained the right to enter here. The guide led on the way, and after passing many richly furnished rooms, they reached the Hall of Harmony, and here was Jesus left alone. Among the instruments of music was a harpsichord, and Jesus sat in thoughtful mood inspecting it, when quietly a maiden of entrancing beauty came into the hall. She did not seem to notice Jesus as he sat and mused, so busy with his thoughts. She found her place beside the harpsichord. She touched the chords most gently, and she sang the songs of Israel. And Jesus was entranced. Such beauty he had never seen. Such music he had never heard. The maiden sang her songs. She did not seem to know that anyone was near. She went her way. And Jesus, talking with himself, said out, "What is the meaning of this incident? I did not know that such entrancing beauty and such queen-like loveliness were ever found among the sons of men. I did not know that voice of angel ever graced a human form, that seraphic music ever came from human lips." For days he sat entranced. The current of his thoughts was changed. He thought of nothing but the singer and her songs. He longed to see her once again, and after certain days she came. She spoke and laid her hand upon his head. Her touch thrilled all his soul, and for the time, forgotten was the work that he was sent to do. Few were the words that the maiden said. She went her way, but then the heart of Jesus had been touched. A love flame had been kindled in his soul, and he was brought to face the sorest trial of his life. He could not sleep nor eat. Thoughts of the maiden came, they would not go. His carnal nature called aloud for her companionship. And then he said, "Lo, I have conquered every foe that I have met. And shall I now be conquered by this carnal love? My Father sent me here to show the power of love divine, that love that reaches every living thing. Shall this pure, universal love be all absorbed by carnal love? Shall I forget all creatures else and lose my life in this fair maiden, though she is the highest type of beauty, purity, and love?" Into its very depths his soul was stirred, and long he wrestled with this angel idol of his heart. But when the day was almost lost, his higher ego rose in might. He found himself again, and then he said, "Although my heart shall break, I will not fail in this my hardest task. I will be the victor over carnal love." And when again the maiden came and offered him her hand and heart, he said, "Fair one, your very presence thrills me with delight. Your voice is benediction to my soul. My human self would fly with you and be contented in your love. But all the world is craving for a love that I have come to manifest. I must then bid you go, but we will meet again. Our ways on earth will not be cast apart. I see you in the hurrying throngs of earth as minister of love. I hear your voice in song that wins the hearts of men to better things." And then in sorrow and in tears, the maiden went away, and Jesus was again alone. And instantly the great bells of the temple rang. The singers sang a new song. The grotto blazed with light. The Hierophant himself appeared and said, "All hail, triumphant Logos, hail! The conqueror of carnal love stands on the heights." And then he placed in Jesus' hands a scroll on which was written, "Love Divine." Together they passed from the grotto of the beautiful, and in the banquet hall a feast was served, and Jesus was the honored guest. Love divine, the degree achieved by Jesus, is related to the causal level of mind, which is the first of the two levels of superconscious mind. So I believe that by the time Jesus, the student, reaches this level of initiation of love divine, it can be related to the causal level of mind, because this is where he is able to be victor over carnal love. And we're going to talk more about the carnal love and this love divine degree in part 6 of Evolution of Consciousness. And I'm so excited to tell you about that. But just as to scratch the surface here, this particular degree in the causal level of mind is about Jesus understanding and finding that the true twin flame or the true soulmate that he should be seeking is his own inner self. After the degree Love Divine, the Hierophant actually takes Jesus into the chamber of the dead, where he is a student directly of the Hierophant there. And it is in the chamber of the dead where Jesus learns to pass through grief as well. So it's almost like part of this degree, Love Divine, is also learning the deepest grief and how to move forward. And the way that that was recognized in the book was through a child whose mother had died. And as she was following the deathbed of the mother, she recognized a wounded bird, and she stopped following that deathbed and went to minister to the bird. And that's when Jesus asked the child why she did that. And the child replied that her mother was already gone, but this bird here was alive and needed her help. So it was like a passage through grief and how to move forward. And that was giving yourself to the present moment. So it's really connecting with that present moment that can really get you connected with the Holy Spirit. So after the Chamber of the Dead, that is when Jesus is invited to a feast where he's given the final degree of the Brotherhood. The work of Jesus in the Chamber of the Dead was done, and in the temple purple room he stood before the Hierophant. And he was clothed in purple robes, and all the brothers stood. The Hierophant arose and said, "This is a royal day for all the hosts of Israel. In honor of their chosen son, we celebrate the Great Passover feast." And then he said to Jesus, "Brother, man, most excellent of men, in all the temple tests you have won out. 6 times before the bar of right you have been judged. 6 times you have received the highest honors man can give. And now you stand prepared to take the last degree. Upon your brow I place this diadem, and in the great lodge of the heavens and earth, you are the Christ. This is your great Passover rite. You are a neophyte no more, but now a mastermind. Now man can do no more, but God himself will speak and will confirm your title and degree. Go on your way, for you must preach the gospel of goodwill to men and peace on earth, must open up the prison doors and set the captives free." And while the Hierophant yet spoke, the temple bells rang out. A pure white dove descended from above and sat on Jesus' head. And then a voice that shook the very temple said, "This is the Christ." And every living creature said, "Amen." The great doors of the temple swung ajar. The Logos journeyed on his way a conqueror. So here the Hierophant presents Jesus with the title of the Christ. And he is told that man no longer exists here, basically. And that he will now be speaking directly from God. And what I believe this really means is that you're no longer doing the will of the selfish lower self. You're really no longer connected to the lower ego whatsoever, because now you are at the pinnacle of the mind triangle. Your awareness includes all things even below. So at this point in consciousness, it is also depicted as the top of the map of consciousness from the book Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. So my point here is that once the level of the Christ is reached, it is now the will of God that will be done in the life of the initiate. And he says he's a neophyte no more, but now is basically one with God's will. One of the best things that I learned after reviewing all of this once again was that it's not only about your studies and getting all of this information and taking in more and more information. That is not how you can move from one initiation stage to the next, and finally to enlightenment. So the way to enlightenment is not by simply being a student with your nose stuck in the book. That might be part of it. But just like in the story, Jesus is just so excited to get on to the next test or task, rather than sitting in a luxurious room full of all of the things a student could ever want. He wanted to get down to it and actually have the life experience, actually do the thing that he's supposed to do to overcome his lower self. So the most important message here for this video is that your evolution of consciousness is not about how much useless knowledge you can consume, but the evolution of consciousness is also about how you can take that knowledge you've gained and turn it into wisdom through understanding. And the only way to make knowledge become wisdom, which becomes understanding, is to take it to the streets and really make the new knowledge a part of your day-to-day life and life experience, in your life actions. So don't be one-sided about your evolution of consciousness. Don't only take actions and don't only have your nose buried in a book. It takes both coming together. Well, that about wraps it up for this video. So if you like this video, be sure to click that like button and share this video with all your friends out there. And of course, if you're a viewer but not yet a subscriber, I would just love for you to click subscribe down below. And once you've subscribed, you can then turn on the notifications bell if you'd like to be notified each and every time I upload a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching and spending your time with me. I love you. And I'll see you next time. Bye.